Hello, hello, hello. I'm Franklin Abbott, and I want to welcome you here to this afternoon of a conversation with June Dobbs Butts. June is a marvelous person, and that's why we're all here. Everybody knows that. She comes from an illustrious family. She's the youngest of 6 sisters, all daughters of John Wesley Dobbs. For a while, they held the Guinness Book of World Records for the most siblings attending a college, which was Spelman College. So her eldest sister was the mother of the late Maynard Jackson, and her next oldest sister was Mattawilda Dobbs.
She was number 5.
She's number 5, right. June is number 6. And Mattawilda was a famous opera singer. She was the first African American to sing at La Scala. So this is quite an illustrious family. They lived in quite an interesting neighborhood. They lived sort of catty corner across the street from the King family. And June and her sisters were good friends with the King children. And June had a particularly close relationship with a guy she called ML. They went to high school and college together because she was at Spelman and he was at Morehouse. And after college, they did a research project together where they drove around interviewing Baptist ministers, African American Baptist ministers. And June said that ML would drive and that she would administer the questionnaire. She went on to Columbia in New York for her studies and received her EDD there. She got involved with Planned Parenthood and wrote a major essay on sex education that was published in 1977 in Ebony magazine.
$3,000. That was record-breaking back then.
All right. Now we know. And that article brought her to the attention of Masters and Johnson, who invited her to St. Louis to their research project. She became the first African-American sex therapist trained by Masters and Johnson, which is why...
And no more sense.
We had adult discretion on our invitation this afternoon. She went on to teach at Meharry Medical College, Fisk, Howard, and to work as a scientist at the CDC. She's just a marvelous person. What we're doing here today is there's a fellow in back who is recording this for Georgia State University's archive special collection on women and gender. And I think Morna Gerard is here. Morna, could you just say a word about the collection?
Yeah, we have a wonderful, actually Georgia State has some great collections in special collections, all sort of social justice based, but I have the best one, which is Women and Gender. So I document the history of women and the LGBTQ communities, and we actually had a wonderful day. Was it spring? I went as technical support with Franklin when we interviewed June, and we had a marvelous time. And I remember at the time thinking, I wish we could hear some of the poems. So I'm actually really excited that we're going to be able to record you telling us your poems. So I'm very happy to be here today again to see you, June.
Thank you.
So, June, I know June because of my friend Jeff, who knows June because of his friend Otha, who knows June because of, there's
Cynthia.
Cynthia,
my
here.
My student.
So we can go back at least 5 generations of friends in terms of how June and I met. But you can make a friend at any age, and I think it's a marvelous thing to have friends of every age. So that being said, let me present Dr. June Dobbs Butts.
Thank you. Can I cry now? I feel a little bit like I'm at my own funeral, but not sad, which I would hope it wouldn't be one day. But actually, so much has happened, and life has gotten so bright. Last summer, I was very sick, very, very sick, and my dear friend Jeff called me up one day on the phone, and he said, "Would you like to hear a poem?" And I said, "Yeah, anything." And he read this poem that Franklin wrote called Milky Way, about the heavenly firmament, Milky Way. It gave me such courage. I said, would you read it again? And he read it 2 or 3 more times, and it just, I wish I knew it from memory. I don't think I want to take it for granted like that. I didn't bring it today, but I have read it before, and it's in the book Pink Xenia. If you haven't bought it, buy it. It's marvelous. It's restoring. So, when I was asked if I would like this opportunity to talk, I forgot the impact of dear friends and the chain they just told you, how so forth begot so forth and so forth begot so forth, how we met, how you make friends, how you live, how you get courage, how you share your disappointments and get over the bruises and bring lipstick when you need it and put on a happy face and move on. So I'm not going to be sentimental. I've got enough reality to kind of go through. And I wanted to share some poems I wrote about 25 years ago when I was very alive. So these are what I call erotic poems. My friend Jeff doesn't think they're erotic, but I'll let you decide. This first one, borrowing from Elizabeth Barrett Browning's husband, is called How Do I Love Thee? Count with me the ways. I love you for the sweetness you bring to sex. I love you also for your savage passion. I love your little boy charm, that ageless quality that belies your years. I've loved making love to you in this brief interlude, more precious for its brevity. I love your voice, husky with its trace of the island's trade winds. I love you for the virility in your voice when you're talking shop with some man on the phone. I love the tenderness in your voice when you kiss me good morning. I love your hands. My eyes are riveted to those nonchalant gestures. I love the way you move your hips in bed, not mechanically, like some people in back and forth spasms, but spiraling, yes, literally screwing, moving me and moving into my very being, uplifting, blessing, and yes, devouring, rejuvenating, restoring, refreshing, reviving me quite until I gasped for air. I loved the look on your face when I said your mouth was made for my clitoris. I love to play with your penis while you nuzzle at my breast. And when I fall asleep in your powerful arms, as aftershocks of delight slide through my tired body, I can fall asleep as I fell in love, entirely and easily at peace because I'm home. And that's about as erotic as I can be. This next one is called Friday Night Countdown. And you have to go boom, da, da, boom, da, da, boom, da, da. So I'm going to ask this side of the room to say boom together. Boom, boom. And it can even get softer. Boom, boom. We say da, da, boom, da, da, boom, da, da, boom, da, da. That's the rhythm I want. Thanks. Come on. You got to do your part. Boom, da, da, boom. Yeah. Let you in my heart last night. Ring, telephone, ring. Thought you were, okay, don't, because you're throwing me off.
And that's true.
That's true. But you can pat your foot. That's all right. Boom, da, da. Just think that. Da, da, boom, da, da. That's your hard kind of love dub. Okay. Let you in my heart last night. Ring, telephone, ring. Thought you were the morning light. Ring, telephone, ring. You said you would call today, kissed my brow and went your way, leaving me alone to say, ring, telephone, ring. Empty arms and an empty bed, ring, telephone, ring. Empty thoughts in my empty head, ring, telephone, ring. Don't like being bound to you. Don't like waiting round for you. But do I want you? Of course I do. So ring, you stupid phone, ring. Yeah, I told you they were erotic. And this next one is just called Love Sonnet. Moisture forming here and there, pulses beating everywhere, moaning, groaning, breathing, seething, pressing, caressing, straining and draining. Our rapture holds us like a wave. With cresting happiness it gave a swift delight that's never lost, though soon dissolved by wavelets tossed. Your condom throbs within a fire. Our love has filled my heart's desire. As molten passion melts us down, you gently stroke my pubic mound. Soft, wet, warm, and sweet the lip. Kisses seal us tip to tip. And you don't have to applaud. Thank you. This one is a kind of a talky one, but I'm calling it Ode to the Clitoris. Well, all of us should be grateful. Compact bunch of nerve-filled tissue, such a hidden treasure. How could Freud have made an issue of your worth or measure? You play an instrumental part when one takes the leisure, transforming passion into art by radiating pleasure. Do you cause fear in power-filled men who only powerful want to be? Why have they scarred you years on end by sanctioned clitoridectomy? Are you the source of woman's strength instead of her vagina? That vaulted and potential length, tough, fragile, like pure china? You who possess intrinsic worth, enriching beyond measure, can bless the sex act, even birth, by radiating pleasure. And here's one called Penis Envy. His maleness never hindered Dr. Freud from knowing things girls hated or enjoyed, and so his theory seems a trifle callous, that girls are sad because they lack a phallus. Had Freud seen modern locker rooms and stalls, and had he read what's written on those walls, I'm sure Freud would revise his thoughts anew, for men judge men by penis size, 'tis true. Male veneration of erectile tissue can often make erection quite an issue, no matter that he got it heretofore. The question is, for this time, will he score? The white man worries in and out of season. The white man hates the black man for this reason. Thank you. Thank you. 35 years ago, folks. Okay. This is a very bothersome one to me because it happened just like this. I had been on a radio program in D.C., and I don't know why I gave my home phone number. I said, we've run out of time, but if you want to call me, call, and I gave my home phone. You know, I used to do things like that. So I went home early next morning, like 6:30 or so. I'd gotten up to have some coffee, and I'm just calling it she and I, she and I, she. Dr. Butts, I heard you last night on the radio, and well, I hope maybe you can help me. I, are you in trouble? She, yes ma'am, my doctor told me yesterday I got the STD. I, so you've been sexually active? She, yes ma'am, my stepmother say I'm gonna always be in trouble cause I like it too much. I, let me ask you something. How old are you? She, I'd be 15 next week, but I had a baby when I was 13. I, and how old were you when you first started having sex? She, 7. Stand. This one's called Sexual Schizophrenia. It's okay if feelings are exotic. No, I'm sorry. It's okay if feelings are exotic, but don't let your feelings get erotic. It's très chic if fantasies obsess you, but don't ask your lover to caress you. It's in vogue to dress in threads revealing, but don't dress for comfort or with feeling. It's important to look hot and sexy. Who cares if libido's anorexia? And this is for a Swedish friend of mine. It's called You Speak My Language. And when I asked you, what were those words, you know, those Swedish words I said sounded Swedish? You know, those words you murmured before going to sleep last night. What were you saying? You said, fantastiskt gott. And then I asked whether gott meant God or good, and you said, it's all the same. So may it ever be between us, Håkan. Fantastic good. Told you it was erotic. And this is called Sonnet to a Love Child. If we were young, I'd let our child, with garlands hung, reflect your smile. If love can show by welcome lay, as strangers know from far away, then our child too could speak, could greet this world with lays unfurled from me, from you. This drama we cannot rehearse, and so our child lives in this verse. This one's called Lust Love. I heard someone who knew explain, lust love is much like airplane glue. Once sniffed, it soon invades the brain, and then addiction follows through. Lust love's a virus known to seek compliance in a willing host, and thus it seems to reach a peak in desperate, lonely hearts the most. Lust by itself is conscience-free. Its needs are greedy, never sated. Love means responsibility and wants the loved one's needs abated. Though lust is selfish, love lets loose the shackles that enslave the will. Lust love makes insight seem obtuse in those whose instincts govern still. And so I'm hooked quite willingly by love's petard, by idle boast that I'd stay free, while chillingly I lust for him whom I love most. This one's called Masturbation Interruptus. I like to touch my pubic hair and ponder when and how and where dear Mother Nature chose this cover to sensitize my hand as lover. When I caress with lightest touch these tendril hairs that yield so much of me that lives, of me that's new, why is it now I think of you? Why should your image, memory bright, now rest between my legs at night? Why do I still recall your touch that gave me pause, that made me clutch? I touch just like I used to do, but traitor hairs beam thoughts of you. And so I'm going to stop with the erotic poems for a while because I would like to move on to something that we can maybe have chance to discuss. So I'm going to pass out a poem called Rainbow. You've already passed it out. Great, thank you. Thank you. If you could put those either on a chair or something for me. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, this poem is called Rainbow. I watched you as you slept last night, and feelings like a rainbow grew, first faint, then growing bold and bright, then somber, like a pre-dawn blue. My red eye, still unfocused then, admired your body's calm repose and marveled how it is that men go straight to sleep when passion goes. My orange eye could better see the myriad looks that lined your face, I wondered, could your dreaming be concerned with me or outer space? My yellow eye delighted me, for it could tell you were erect. I almost touched you tenderly, but stopped myself by sheer neglect. My green eye, filled with jealousy, was sure you dreamt of someone new. I writhed in animosity. I hated her. I hated you. My blue eye watched you try to speak and heard you murmur my own name. I trembled and my heart grew weak. You put my jealousy to shame. Mood indigo, the bluest eye, was filled with melancholy thought of transient life, of when and why, of all the joys our love has brought. My purple eye was growing blind as I stretched out to lie with you. I'm glad I cannot read your mind, for that's best left to dreaming too. I watched you as you slept last night, and feelings like a rainbow grew, first faint, then growing bold and bright, then somber, as in, I love you. Any comments, criticisms, whatever? I'm through with this one, thank you. Okay, the next is a little essay that I'd like to read. If you want to comment, just raise your hand. We can stop as we go along. Yes, please, in the back.
Have you ever met Moms Mabley?
I never met Moms Mabley, but I sure did go to this, I can't think of the name of the place. I want to say the Savoy. That wasn't the Savoy.
Apollo.
In New York on 25th Street? Tom. What did I say? Yeah, Moms Mabley was rumored to be transsexual. That was what I heard years later. And I had the opportunity to work with many transsexual people in Nashville, Tennessee, and at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And they said so. So I didn't ever, doubt it. So good to see everybody, relatives and friends.
You said you haven't met her?
I had not met her, no. I met other transsexuals who said they heard it was a genetic male.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting, because I grew up on her, listened to her albums. I'm 60, on her albums and her and Red Fox.
Yes.
So, yeah. Wow.
Razor sharp sense of humor. Very intelligent person. I hope she had a good life. I don't know. I don't know anybody who knew her. I knew these transsexuals. We had a discussion group at Howard. Howard was not going to do the operation, but they would do, people who were getting the operation had to have 2 years living in the new gender, or their gender that they felt was originally theirs. And so Howard provided that opportunity. I led a discussion group. One of the chief arguments we had, and I'm just rambling, I'm just chatting, was with the director of the mental health center there at Howard, because he wanted these people to use the male toilet. And I said, that vitiates everything they're here for. They're living as women, they're working as women, they're putting in time with society to verify something they feel very deeply and are going through all kinds of risks and procedures to live it out, and you're going to ask them to use the men's toilet? They don't want to be seen go into the bathroom. They're not going to stand up and urinate. They don't do that. They sit down. And I felt, I don't know, like the mother hen or something, because what this doctor finally decided, the head of the department was formed, what I believed, we both agreed. But this man who ran the clinic, he was in charge of the mental health clinic at Howard, was very much opposed to it. And he had a lot of very fundamentalist religious outlooks, bedrock in his psyche. But what he told me was that if I would stand at the door when they assembled, they could go to the bathroom, like first grade or kindergarten or something, and then see them out. And then they'd have to leave at the end of the session. They couldn't go back again. So we used to do that. I used to tell them, be on time, for potty break. And we'll all file in, and then you can come to the session. This was a long time ago. Yes.
I don't know if I'm transsexual or not, but early on I discovered that when I became aware that there were boys and girls, that I was different from the girls and not quite like the boys. And in elementary school, I accepted that I was different. And I always used the girls' bathroom. And if the girls saw me, they would say, "Oh, it's you." Because if I went to the boys' bathroom,
What city?
Atlanta.
Oh.
I have another story that relates to you.
Yes.
In Atlanta, but if I went to the boys' bathrooms, they wanted to pull down my pants to see what I was. And the ones who knew what I was wanted samples. So I would just go, and I would keep a nickel if I just could hold out and go through downtown Atlanta to go to the Union Station, because you could put a nickel in the bathroom at Union Station and use the clean bathroom. But if I had to go to the bathroom, I would just go to the girls' bathroom, and they would say, "Oh, it's you." And they never reported me to anybody. I had a 6th grade teacher who would assign a girl to tell her if someone bothered me when she left the room. So all along, I was kind of accepted and protected. I firmly believe that people who are in the closet do themselves a disservice, because I firmly believe if you accept yourself, other people who will accept you. When I discovered that I was different, I made the declaration that people who can accept me can go through life with me, everyone else can go to hell, and I will have a normal life. And that's what I think.
Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. Any other comments? Feel free to speak as we go along. I have a little essay here, which I want to ask you to share, because I don't have enough copies to go around. And you may take them with you. If you want a copy, we can start a little file. I'll email you or something like that. If you want to receive a copy at the end, I'll be very glad to do that. So I'm not going to stop as we go through it, but if you want to make notes on the copies you have, and we can discuss it at the end, okay? I'm calling this the numbers game. Years ago, while watching Dr. Phil, my favorite TV personality at the time, I heard myself scream. The usually amiable host was upbraiding a woman who had given her age as 38 for having had sex with 7 male partners. 7? I jumped up from my couch. What's so outrageous about that? I shouted at the bedroom walls. I felt that Dr. Phil was shielding the American public from knowing basic sexual data. Hadn't he read historic publications about the increasing frequency of sexual partners in today's adult population, from early references like the Kinsey Report or the Sorensen Report on adolescence, all the way to modern times? Here we were, years after the tragic outbreak of HIV/AIDS, and Dr. Phil sounded more like a sadist from the Middle Ages than his usual reasonable self. I felt he wouldn't have censured a man for speaking publicly about having sex with 7 or even more women. My mind raced back to myself at the time of my divorce. The first thought that crystallized was remembering that I felt old. I said out loud, "Well, I was 42, but nobody considered that as being middle-aged." I counted all my sexual partners on one hand, including my recently divorced husband of 17 years, and still had 2 fingers left over. Scenes from my entire life flashed by, leaving me feeling sexually shortchanged and furious. I jotted down random ideas as I tried to anchor or clarify my thoughts. I was compiling a sexual nosology, not a classification of diseases per se, but my attempt to assess my sexual life. Far from feeling dirty, I felt empowered, even scientific. I knew I was traveling beyond Dr. Phil's sexist rebuke because I understood the woman on his show. She was just trying to be honest. She hadn't mentioned any female sex partners, and that fit my profile too. I don't feel negative toward same-sex attraction or toward any genuinely respectful, non-predatory sexual expression, for that matter. I respect honest expressions of human sexual behavior, using a phrase I learned from my valuable years in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, using YET, Y-E-T, as an acronym for You're Eligible Too. So I say I've yet to experience a same-sex relationship because I've never felt that primal urge. Yet, I learned from psychoanalysis in my late 30s to trust the process whereby my sense modalities become the arbiters of later sexual feelings. Seeing, smelling, tasting. One of the notes to myself that I started compiling with care over the years has been my personal list of 37 male sexual partners. 37 men with whom I've had memorable sexual encounters. I may not have wanted every one of them at the time, but I've learned something of value from each person. These men came into my life from all over the world, sharing a range of sexual experiences from rapture to rape. And though my list stopped growing about 20 years ago, when I review these relationships, I understand other dimensions of myself. I never engaged in sex outside my marriage, meaning the 15 good years as well as the last 2 years of hell. I admit that my memory of the last years of my marriage before I divorced my husband are somewhat blighted by the disease process of my alcoholism, leaving blurred memories and embarrassment. Since that time, I've wanted to live a completely sober life. However, I didn't come into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous until I was 60 years old. Since then, and God willing, on August 17, 2016, I'll celebrate 28 years of continuous sobriety. It took years of desperately trying to stay sober before I finally realized the simple truth that continuous sobriety just means staying sober one day at a time, the way we are conscious one day at a time. AA taught me to honor the lifelong healing process of making amends, first to myself, then to others, by being willing to continue making new amends as needed. This openness of habitual spiritual practice can lead to spiritual healing over time. My biggest regret is that my years of alcoholism tormented my 3 little children, whether I realized it at the time or not. Because I didn't go out to bars but chose to drink at home every evening, I thought, I'm right here at home for my kids. It took years of completely sober living and repeated attempts at making honest amends before I could establish any degree of trust with my children, Lucia, Flory, and my dear son, Eric, or even with my precious granddaughter, Aisha June. Both she and her mother, Flory, lived with me a few years after Flory's divorce. My older daughter, Lucia, now deceased, was the first family member to complain stridently, labeling it alcoholism. And I truly regret not being able to share much of a sober life with her. Far from soothing, I remember Lucia's tormented voice begging me not to offer to teach my human sexuality courses at Smith College, even though her dad had not paid her tuition and she was being pressured to vacate her dormitory quarters. She said, Mom, if you taught anything else, like French, it would be different. It mattered not when I protested that French was far more esoteric in the lives of college girls than human sexuality. My work embarrassed my child. Conversely, Flory urged several brilliant high school colleagues and friends to audit my courses at UMass. She also convinced her home ec teacher to allow my UMass students to give mini courses on aspects of family life education at her high school level. I just wanted to say one of the pleasures in talking with Cynthia is that she remembers my children when we all arrived there and they were so young, and so were we. Yeah, true. My son Eric choosing the middle range between his sisters, felt proud of me when he wrote a paper interviewing me after Ebony magazine paid me to write its first article on human sexuality. Later, Eric felt mortified when I ran over and kissed him on the football field once after his high school team lost a big game. Looking at myself as June the woman rather than as June the mother, I'll allow myself one compliment. Although I received several sincere proposals of marriage over the years, I never remarried, bringing, quote, a new daddy into our little home to further complicate things. I didn't meet a single guy, black or Caucasian, whom I thought would make a truly loving father to all 3 of my children. I have to stop and say that again because it really is true. There were not a whole lot of fellas that I really wanted to marry, but there were 1 or 2 who would have been a good father to Eric, but didn't get along with the girls. And then there were those who had 1 daughter, not ever Lucia, but Flory. They really liked her. And that kind of got on my nerves. My cardinal rule was to meet lovers outside my home and to hire competent babysitters to stay with my kids whenever I went away, whether on business or pleasure. Some of my girlfriends voiced well-intentioned criticism that I was depriving my children of needed male input by not allowing guys to spend the night. However, I had observed the wrenching heartbreak that their own children suffered when they quipped, "Mom's affair finally fizzled." Would that God the gift would give us to see ourselves as others see us. When I taught at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, my daughter Flory became great friends with a brilliant boy of Chinese ancestry named Fred Ho. Over many family dinners, I learned that his father, a noted tenured professor at UMass, engaged in family violence, routinely beating his wife and abrasively intimidating his 2 daughters, until young Fred reluctantly accepted the challenge and beat up his father severely, winning a Pyrrhic victory. Though underage, I granted Fred permission to audit 2 of my oversubscribed classes in human sexuality in UMass's School of Health Sciences Division of Public Health, and Fred held his own, raising questions that confounded me as a black woman. Before I get into the questions, was there anything you wanted to say about this period, Cynthia? You were always such an observant student.
Gary said I told him.
Oh, Gary, is there anything you'd like to share?
I gotta go home.
You got to live with the woman, okay.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. Anything you want to
The
share?
only thing, not the only thing, the one I remember from the class, okay, I was living in California. I had moved there from California.
Can everybody hear her?
Yes.
Yeah, and so, and I had a boyfriend. I loved him in California. Guy I later married. So June gave us assignments on. You taught about masturbation, and we had these assignments. I was like, oh no, I can't do this.
I don't even remember. This is
I
great.
do. I didn't even know what it was.
There's a word for it.
Yeah, I didn't know. You know, at that time I was young and everything, but I remember that with the class. Jill was very popular. Very popular. You were very popular, and she was close to one of my professors, the one who recruited me from California to go there, Dr. William Darity, who died December of last year. And so you guys were close, and your children were close. You know, your young.
Our
Your
2
youngest
daughters. Yeah.
Was close with Dr. Darity's daughter. And then I just remember when your oldest daughter, she was the first female to go to Amherst College,
to finish Amherst.
which had been an all-male school, you know, a very prominent school. Yeah. And years later, I learned, I have these friends in San Francisco, which I did not know. I never knew that he went to UMass, his wife went to UMass. I never knew that. And their daughter graduated from Amherst College. And so I told them about your daughter.
Thank you. Okay, these are some of the questions that Fred Ho asked me over the dinner table. Dr. Butts, why do you insist on focusing on the black and white dyad in your human sexuality classes when Asians, that is Chinese people, constitute the largest single ethnic bloc in world population? Don't you know any Chinese Asian sexual paradigms? Or, I said no. Dr. Butts, have you ever, well, do you? No, I bet you don't. Dr. Butts, have you ever had an Asian lover? Not yet. Or a good friend of Asian descent? Now that gets me. No, never met an Asian colleague. Dr. Butts, have you ever known or worked with any Asian people in your entire life? I had to answer in the negative. Years after I moved with the younger two children from Amherst, Mass. To St. Louis, Missouri, to work with Masters and Johnson, Fred, I just want to stop and say one thing here. I've been introduced as the only black person that Masters and Johnson trained as a sex therapist. That's true. And I used to tell my students, now you know more about them than you do about me. I don't know why. But for one thing, nobody else would put up with the hours except a woman, usually. You're not going to get a male physician to come in, be there in his white coat at 9 o'clock, not leave until 6, Monday through Friday, half day Saturday, 1 or 2 hours on Sunday. I worked every day for a year and a half. So after about the first month, I said, I can't take this. I'm not used to being on the job all day, half day Saturday and 1 or 2 hours on Sunday, not to meet clients on Sunday, but to listen to tapes and to be grilled on it during the week. So it was just too intense. But they had the firm belief that every couple, they didn't believe in a single person coming to their clinic. They wanted a couple to come. You could be married, unmarried, gay, straight, whatever. And the therapist had to be male, female. They believed that paradigm worked. So, and as Dr. Masters used to say, you start your own clinic, you can have your own rules. So years after I moved with the two younger children from Amherst, Mass. To St. Louis, Missouri to work with Masters and Johnson, Fred looked up my daughter, Flory, and they continued a warm friendship. Now using his full ethnic name, Fred Waiban Ho, he had achieved international stature as a professional musician, as an exponent of the innovative cultural jazz idiom, even though he disparaged the specific word jazz. Fred's music was too atonal for my taste. However, Flory, ever his ardent fan, remained devoted. Unfortunately, the brilliant young Fred Waiban Ho died when he was still heartbreakingly young. Today, the first lesson I try to teach others, especially women, is, quote, learn to appreciate your sexuality and your spirituality together through the first natural step of masturbation. And as they say, this is an inside job. I never have to tell men that. Haven't had a male student yet that I had to tell that to.
This story about Fred, there's a play at True Colors Theater at the Southwest Performing Arts Center called Smart People. And it's all about race in academia. And there's a dinner table where there's male and female black folks, and then one white person who studies race and is very much into race, and this Asian professor. And the blacks and the whites start arguing about race, and she goes, oh yeah, I really don't exist here. And does this, it was a real aha.
Yes.
Around the whole discussion of race and how Asians frequently aren't a part of it.
And yet he's right. Not just Asians, but Chinese people represent the biggest single ethnic group in the world. Now, either they don't carry on about it all the time, or they just I don't know, I have yet to meet an Asian colleague. I've worked with people from India and many times throughout my life, but I have not met any Asians. I would look forward to such an interchange. Maybe the internet can provide that. Years after I moved, I said all that. Let's see. Today, the first lesson, today reflecting great diversity, there is a plethora of books, films, discussion groups, plus the internet to get one started. That's on the idea of spirituality and masturbation as the link to spirituality and sexuality. I might even add that those who deplore the stupidity and the violence found in most pornography may still find wholesome examples by searching the media of other cultures for eroticism that is both spiritual and nonviolent. For me personally, as with most senior citizens, the practice of self-stimulation is now, at 88, less a matter of passionate sexual fulfillment than a delicious way to aid relaxation. My primary health complaint for 13 years has been congestive heart failure. Thus, I fear invoking those dreaded heart palpitations that are associated with physical exertion. I rarely engage in masturbation, yet you're eligible too. Sex is not an automatic turn-off in old age, far from it. And when the mood is right, so am I. I'm grateful that self-stimulation and orgasmic fulfillment are still within my capacity. I hope that honesty and sharing my story will help others. Mine is only one story. Now to conclude, the impact of having watched Dr. Phil at his worst several years ago. After turning off the TV, I tried to etch out a few parameters of my own erotic behavior. I soon found that trying to evaluate my own sexual behavior was difficult. And I was also rating these behaviors on a sexual feelings gradient, a process called sexual mapping. Over time, I scribbled down several broad, very dissimilar parameters encompassing my total personal psychosexual experience. Number one, this was back in 1932, sexual molestation, age 4. I was victimized once by a nameless man, a boarder, living next door to our home, who performed oral sex on me, resulting in a mental dissociation of the event over the next 30 years until I underwent psychoanalysis. By starting this intensive treatment in my late 30s, I was able to identify and deal with my childhood trauma gradually. I finally became sufficiently desensitized to use this personal experience later in life in various clinical as well as educational pursuits. I just have to say this because Franklin did encourage me to talk about family and blend it all in. My oldest sister was 20 years older than I, and she had just won a scholarship to go to France to study in France to work toward her certificate as a master's degree. And the young, not so young, he was 14 years older than she. The man she was engaged to was Reverend Maynard Jackson, that's senior. And he wanted to drive her to New York to get the boat. People didn't travel by plane back in those days. So my mother said, but you can't be alone. And they said, oh, we were looking forward to that. She said, no, I have to go with you. And so she took the middle two daughters also, so they really wouldn't have any time alone. And to take care of me and the sister next to me and my father, the number 2 sister had finished studying that summer at University of Chicago on scholarship and was back home so she could cook and clean and do all the household chores, be the mommy, while they were away. And I missed my mother. So I was 4, and there was, without crossing the street, I could go around the corner to a little store where this lady who owned the corner house had a store attached to her home, Mrs. Jackson, and she sold a lot of different things for a penny. You could shop all day and buy 3 cents worth of candy. So I was just passing her house to go around the corner when this boarder on the front porch said, you looking for some candy? You gonna get some candy? I got some. Come on to my room. And we called him Pinky. I really don't know his name. He was a black man, but pink insides of his hands. And I think that's why we called him Pinky, I don't know. But when I went into his room, he shut the door and locked it. And then he proceeded to do this oral sex, which he put his hand over my mouth. I really thought I was gonna die. I thought he was gonna eat me up, like the stories where the, you know, 3 bears or whatever, eat up Goldilocks or whatever. So I was horrified, and my mother was out of town, and he put me back in the backyard and shut the door. Their backyard. We had fences between houses. So I was facing this odd street out here. I recognized the houses, I just never had been there by myself. But I had the good sense to run to the corner, turn the corner, and run to my home. And we always kept the door open, unlocked. That's the way the neighborhood was back then. And I remember running through the door, screaming. My hair was all loose. I never took my hair loose because I didn't know how to comb it. I didn't know how to plait it. But my sister must have cleaned me up. But I don't remember any more about what happened. I've even done hypnosis. One summer I invested in several sessions of hypnosis to see if I could remember it. And then I thought, what would I do with it if I could remember it? Feeling somebody's big hand over my face so you can't breathe. You remember that? No. But what good does it do if you do remember it? So it's not buried, it's not exonerated, it's still kind of floating. But a student asked me one time, and have you forgiven Pinky? I said, are you crazy? No, I hope he dies and goes to hell immediately, if not sooner. Number 2, 1933, negative coercive sex, it sounds like my neighborhood was not safe. Same-sex play. I recall playing hide-and-go-seek at the home of 2 sisters who lived in the richest, most elaborate home on our block. They asked my sister to be it while we 3 hid in a closet. One sister grabbed my arms behind my back while the other, reaching inside my panties, roughly fingered my genitals. I protested but couldn't stop them until I screamed, thus giving away our hiding place. I ran home and didn't tell anyone what happened. Years later, I was able to use my childhood experience constructively. After joining the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences in a reputable medical school that sponsored an annual conference on community awareness of psychiatric issues, I asked some social workers to identify some of the trouble spots they faced in getting community support. They gave an immediate answer: sexual child abuse. This stirred me deeply, and I started writing a proposal. When asked later to submit proposals to increase community awareness of psychiatric issues, I presented my proposal dealing with Black child sexual abuse. Most of the staff applauded my presentation. However, vociferous criticism came from a lawyer who held an adjunct position in the department. Personally outraged by my suggested theme, this usually tactful man was fearful of censure from Caucasian critics who had been annual donors to the conference. He was sincerely stressed about, quote, washing our dirty linen in public. My validation group of social workers understood the lawyer's apprehension, but felt that honest exposure would do far more good than harm. The impasse was broken when the chairman of the department dropped by after I had called him, our planning session, asking permission to vote, saying he too had been sexually molested as a very young boy and now wanted to do prevention at the level of community psychiatry. It was an excellent conference. There was an athlete who was good in football and basketball, and I can't think of his name, but his wife was working on her doctorate at Auburn, and she came over. She was, I think, our main speaker. No, we had 2 psychiatrists, 2 women psychiatrists from Yale, Black women. But she was getting her doctorate, and she was very good person. I can't think of the husband's name, at any rate. Number 3, this is the categories that I put down as markers. Something big happened in my life. Masturbation, age 5. My mother, and all of this is pretty close to age 4, when the guy next door molested me, Pinky. My mother, noticing flecks of blood on my panties, asked, "Have you been playing with yourself, June?" To which I murmured, "Yes, ma'am." Sighing with sincere concern, Mama said, "Oh, June, you may not be able to grow up to become a mother." Now, to this day, I don't know what was the connection. But she thought that. I can recall feeling sudden terror, screaming as tears spilled down my face. My middle sisters, Millie and Josie, rushed into the room asking what on earth had happened. Mama whispered, "Well, June's been playing. Well, she's been playing with her toki." My sister Millie lowered her voice to the level of Mama's whisper, saying sympathetically, "Oh, Mama, please don't keep using that old slavery time in Mississippi word. Why not say the correct scientific word, Mama, which is vagina?" I stopped wailing so I could better hear what was being said. And after listening intently without understanding much, I realized that my older sisters were gently correcting our worried Mama. Maybe I wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe I could still grow up to be okay and become a mother, please God. One day, I never consciously touched my genitals beyond bathing after that incident until I was 22 years old. I recall growing up quietly, becoming a young woman, skipping 12th grade as part of the National War effort, and finishing Spelman College as my class president with scholastic honors, thereby setting a national average or record for a family of 6 sisters who all graduated from the same college. I went on to obtain a Master's of Arts degree at Teachers College, Columbia, like my 3 immediately older sisters. Besides having worked I want to say my dad had 3 jobs. Most of all of my life, he had 3 jobs until he went to work for the Masons. Besides having worked some summers as a clerk in my father's office for the Prince Hall Masons of Georgia, my first real job came after I obtained the master's degree with a teaching position in the psychology department at historic Fisk University. Dating infrequently, I managed to meet a medical student in his sophomore year at Meharry Medical College, Hugh F. Butts, who hailed from New York City. He had the smarts of West Indian culture and was more refined than most of the other medical students, even playing the violin. I recall lying in bed after our first heavy dates, trying to evoke the good vibrations I'd felt during our petting sessions, but not reaching orgasm. The following incident took place before I met Hugh. I don't mean to put him down as a marker, but I found that shows up, and so I just have to notice it when I see it. Number 4, 1946, sexual intercourse, age 18. My first real sex partner was a tall, lanky basketball whiz whom I had hoped to marry after we finished college. Today, I wonder how I struggled through the 3 or 4 encounters of unmitigated painful sexual intercourse that I endured with this athletic but unimaginative young man. I also wonder how I could have been so cruel to myself. A lot of girls go through that. So devoid of personhood to have endured such torture. I want to stop and say I was also Miss Maroon and White, which was the school colors of Morehouse, our brother school. So when I was elected the football queen, you might say, I didn't have a date. They had to get me someone to take me to the party that night. Anyway, number 5 category, 1950, acquaintance rape, age 22. I was raped by a young divinity student with mental imbalance. We had met 2 years prior through a dear friend whose friendship I prized greatly. In fact, I only dated this young man because he had been introduced by my treasured and always reverently respectful friend, Martin Luther King Jr., affectionately known as ML by his Atlanta family and friends. The rape occurred on my first teaching job, and to my absolute shock, I became pregnant immediately. Years later, I read in a medical journal that pregnancy occurs with much greater than chance frequency after the intense assault of rape. That is still staggering to me, why we don't know. why it happens.
The politician who was saying the opposite. There was a big debate where he was saying, well, you know, women don't get pregnant by rape. The body protects them. And it's like,
Read this, man.
yeah.
And most women don't talk about it. When you talk about other women, their reluctance to take part in marches and that kind of thing. Several years ago, when Now was new, I tried to get several of my friends whom I knew had had multiple abortions to just give money, not even come out and march, and they hung up. Friends and relatives. Okay, number 5, acquaintance rape. Okay, the rape occurred on my first teaching job until my I said that. Just as I realized my condition, a massive illegal abortion scandal erupted. The Nashville police uncovered a ring of abortionists servicing Nashville's collegiate population when 2 young Caucasian college students died as a result of having visited black physicians for their illegal abortions. Nashville's police force went crazy, launching an intensive surveillance of all taxi drivers, searching for possible leads to the black abortionists. Returning to Atlanta for Christmas, I had been invited to a New Year's Eve party by my dearest friends, M.L. King Jr. and my best girlfriend from childhood, Juanita Sellers, who were in love and planning an imminent marriage. M.L., not knowing that his out-of-town friend and seminary colleague had raped me, innocently invited this fella, who was out of town, to accompany me to a gala New Year's Eve party. First, however, he had promised his mother faithfully that all 4 of us would attend the midnight service at his family church, Ebenezer Baptist Church, which Mrs. King's father had helped to organize. M.L. agreed that we'd partake in Ebenezer's midnight prayer vigil before going on to the other festivities. To my horror, I was now linked in church with my former assailant, who now proposed marriage. In fact, marriage became the topic of the evening. Approaching the sacred altar to ask God's blessings on us in the new year, I could hear both Juanita and M.L. kneeling in prayer, asking God's help as they tried to resolve their perceived differences about where they should make their home to facilitate M.L.'s consecrated work of nonviolence. He said he had promised God that if he found the right woman and he had finished his degrees and all, wherever he got a call to go to take over that church, that would be the place God would be with him to do his work. Juanita said, but can we come back to Atlanta? He said, no, I have to go wherever I'm called. And so she was still praying that they could come to Atlanta. And if they had solved that, they would have gotten married. The weekend they broke up, his dear friend from college had sent him a telegram saying, have I got a girl for you? And that was Coretta. Things happen. The divinity student rapist prayed audibly that, oh no, I'm sorry, I skipped something. Approaching the sacred altar to ask God's blessings on us in the new year, I could hear both Juanita and M.L. kneeling in prayer, asking God's help as they tried to resolve their perceived differences about where they should make their home to facilitate M.L.'s consecrated work of nonviolence. They fervently prayed that they'd be married soon. The divinity student rapist prayed audibly that he and I could work out any differences and get married soon. And yes, I prayed fervently, but silently, that I would get my menstrual period, and soon, very soon. Not one of these prayers was answered. Returning to Nashville, I beleaguered Gladys, my friend across the hall at Ballantyne Hall. She turned to her boyfriend, a handsome young dental student who gallantly offered to escort me to an abortionist whom he knew over in East Nashville. After the 2 Caucasian students died, Nashville's police force had become hysterical trying to locate any taxi driver who knew the man who took the girls to the alleged black abortionist. And at this point, the dental student politely withdrew his gallant offer to escort me to the abortionist in East Nashville. Stunned, I was still grateful for the information which he had provided. Before, I had had absolutely no idea where to start. Now I had the phone number of an abortionist who still offered help. Borrowing money for the abortion from my dear friend Juanita, I tightened my financial belt, by cutting my food expenditure in an already Spartan budget, and by strengthening my resolve for the long cab ride to East Nashville and back alone. When I spoke with the designated abortionist over the phone, he let me know immediately that he knew that my father was John Wesley Dobbs, the Grand Master of the Prince Hall Masons of Georgia, saying that he too was a Mason and had long admired the civic progress in voter registration that my dad had struggled to accomplish in the state of Georgia. I thanked him for speaking so highly of my dad and reiterated the fact that I never wanted anyone to know I was getting an abortion, and that I was grateful for his willingness to offer medical help to me as a woman and a private citizen. I noticed he always referred to the abortion procedure as the interference. He stressed his required fee, admitting that it might seem high, but explained that he asked the prospective woman to spend at least 2 days at his quarters, thus ensuring proper nursing care under sterile conditions. I declined, however, explaining that I couldn't just disappear for 2 days and I couldn't afford his suggested fee. So, agreeing on my having just the interference without the care, I met the abortionist at his office, underwent the abortion, and returned to Ballantine Hall immediately, naively believing everything was safely over. The doctor had explained that after injecting a saline solution, the fetus would automatically pass from my body in a couple of days, and I must maintain absolutely sterile conditions. I had nothing to mitigate the pain and knew little about keeping things sterile. I only knew I endured unimaginable pain alone for 2 days. Locking my door, only Gladys looked in on me occasionally over that weekend, bringing cold plates I'd stored in our kitchen refrigerator, throwing my windows wide open for cross ventilation. The worst thing I had to do was make sure the tiny mass of fetal tissue was completely torn apart before flushing it down the toilet to avoid any possible plumbing breakage, and I heard later identification with me. Tissue identification. I told myself this grisly little sea urchin in the palm of my hand was nothing. It was not a real person. It couldn't live on its own. It was the visible result of a brutal attack rather than an act of love, and I wept, feeling a little crazy as the rubbery shreds slid through my fingers, down into the toilet. Then I became possessed of an enormous burst of energy, like a great wind sweeping through me that translated its energy into seeking another job. Within 3 months, I managed to improve my financial condition immensely, not only changing my teaching jobs, but moving from the little world of Fisk University to Nashville's enormous state school, Tennessee A&I State University, and picking up almost twice the salary. In addition, I also obtained a lucrative little part-time job in a fascinating research study taking place at Meharry Medical College. I bought myself a good little used car and cruised from job to job on sheer nervous energy. I dreamed of running marathons when I had never run in a competitive race before. And I kept my activities as secret as possible from everyone, including my married sister, Millie. Eventually, of course, I had to confide in someone trustworthy because my parents announced they were to visit Nashville just as I was scheduled for an emergency second dilation and curettage. I confided in Bob, my brother-in-law, the soul of discretion, who signed me out of the clinic and drove me by to see my parents briefly, saying I had the flu and needed rest, then setting me up with a few essentials in my new home and not telling Millie until later. I felt I'd broken out of the last remnants of my pretty but pudgy childhood, finding a new self-reliant, skinny but tough me. The increase in my salary was impressive. However, I went through deteriorating health changes due to the lack of sterile nursing care during and after the abortion. So easy to get infection. Seeking professional psychiatric help as soon as I could, I underwent the healing procedure, dilation and curettage, twice. Still, I developed long-term anemia plus residential psychological trauma. I learned that many women's psychological sequelae to abortions are difficult to treat because they involve earlier, deep-seated psychosexual trauma, such as my molestations dating back to 4 and 5 years of age. It took years of psychoanalysis, plus additional psychoanalysis after I'd completely stopped drinking, to learn how to appreciate myself, to interpret the inspired words of the German poet Erich Maria Rilke, learning how to feel whole against the sky. So yes, I thank God, and I thank Mother Nature, and I thank the universe every day of my long and fruitful life. Number 6, 1950, masturbation, age 22. Because I associated orgasm with coitus, I felt somehow my husband gave me the orgasm. Still, I was ashamed to touch my own genitalia for years, despite his urging. By reading widely, speaking honestly with women friends whom I met in graduate school, and again, through the help of male as well as female analysts, my mind was open to try self-exploration. I could not tell another woman how to stimulate her clitoris any more than I could teach her how to swallow her own saliva. To say it's a natural automatic reaction implies she's consciously resisting her natural urges. Learning how to help women appreciate and better understand their bodies became the sex therapy that I learned with Masters and Johnson over my 1.5-year service at their clinic as a staff sex therapist. And the last category, 1955, orgasm through coitus. This modality is regarded with religious fervor by most women because it uniquely permits procreation. On the last night of my 24th year, just before my 25th birthday, which was also to be my wedding day, I experienced orgasm during intercourse for the very first time in my entire life in Hugh's smelly, crowded little car. I felt God had forgiven me for all of the bad things I'd ever done in life because I'd been allowed to experience orgasm, thus glimpsing paradise without having to die first. I might also add the wedding rehearsal was going on and we never made it. And the next day, they all came to my home. We got married in my living room at home, as my sisters had done, except the two who got married in Europe. And so the minister was furious with me. He didn't know where we were. And so he had been used to saying what they said to the man, do you plan to love and cherish and so forth? But to the woman, do you plan to love, honor, and obey? So he asked me that. And I whispered, you're not supposed to say obey, just love and honor. He said, but where were you last night? And I started to say, in heaven. But I saved that, and I just said, well, we couldn't make it. But he finally permitted me to say love and honor. Thank you. Thank you. I can't get this. If you have, gosh, excuse me. If I, just to know that I wanted to write down things that people, if you have questions you'd like to ask me, this is where I profit. Please, Jackson Sarda.
I got a comment.
This is I must announce that he is my niece's grandson. You figure it out.
Aunt June, I know so much about you and feel so closer to you now than I ever did before.
You have to stand up or speak
Oh,
loud.
yeah, no, I was just saying, man, just sitting here and listening to my aunt talk about all this stuff. I feel that much closer to you, Auntie.
Thank you. I spoke with another niece, Michelle. I said, are your daughters coming? She said, they told me, no, Mom, no, we don't. So, I mean, you get that. I get that. But I don't understand it. Don't you remember when you were 5 and 4 and all like that? Well, if you live long enough, you become old. And there's somebody younger than you who thinks that I don't know, you still believe in Santa Claus or something. We do a double take. Got a crush on this David. By the way, I must say that poem about Ring Ring, if you remember it, was to a man named David.
You know how I feel about that too.
Thank you. Please, questions, comments, criticisms. This is the time, yes.
Well, so much that you said kind of resonated with me. I don't know how I never met you. I knew Millicent. We were not good friends, but we were very friendly, and I know Juliet.
Oh, good.
But a defining moment in my life was in 5th grade. Your niece, she let us call her Jeannie, but I know it was the French pronunciation. She was gracious enough to let us little ghetto kids call her Miss Jeannie Jackson.
I see.
I was sent to a room at Krogman Elementary School to show her some of my work, and she said, you should be an artist. And in the mid-50s, I think we'll be colored or we'll be Negro then, I don't know. But whatever we were then, I didn't know we could be artists. So she told me about Henry Otana and Hale Woodruff, both of whom had ties to Atlanta. She told me about the annual competitions at Atlanta University
Yes.
that Hale Woodruff started.
Yes.
And about Jewel Simon, who was a practicing artist in Atlanta at the time.
Yes.
So that's what planted the seed for me to be an artist, and today, I'm reasonably well known locally. I am a practicing artist. I have worked in
What is your
collections
name?
all
Tell us your
over.
name, please.
Freddie Styles.
Freddie Styles.
Freddie Styles.
My friend Jeff had mentioned you, and I'm very glad to meet you. I'm glad my niece Jean, we call her Jean,
No,
because my
yeah.
sister taught French, and she said it's pronounced Jean.
Yeah.
But
But
she
let
was a
us
very
call her Miss
honest
Jeannie
person.
Jackson, and she talked about living and traveling in France. I suspect you probably have spent a fair amount of time in France as well.
Her mother,
Her mom.
my oldest sister.
And when I met Maynard, I told him the story, so he always remembered me fondly whenever he saw me because of that connection.
Oh, that's lovely.
But,
That's a gift. I'm glad she opened the horizons for you.
She did. She
The
did.
world is big.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she did.
Thank you for sharing that.
Something you said about white men. I'd like to share another story, a quick story.
Yes.
I have to stand up for this one. I was in downtown Atlanta with some friends years ago, hooking, I guess you could say. And this car pulled up with this big burly Midwestern conventioneer, and he wanted to spend time with me. So my friends checked his driver's license and his tag number, and I integrated, it's not in the Atlanta history books, heart of Atlanta Motel. So I said to myself, I'm going to be walking funnier tomorrow. Well, when he disrobed and presented this to me, I became a missionary. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And I was kind. I didn't embarrass him, but never wanted to see him again.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, please. You want to stand up, Dr. Beverly?
Okay. You know,
So
Dr.
your voice will carry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've known Dr. Butts for a little while and have always enjoyed my encounters with you. But I also want everyone to know about the history of your family, especially all the good works that your father had done here, especially with Sweet Auburn and his association with the Roosevelt administration, also with Thurgood Marshall, and how we should be so grateful to him for that association with Thurgood Marshall.
Thank you. I will underscore that Mr. Marshall was a house guest in our home for several visits, and they rushed him not only to join the Masons, but to go up through the steps until you become the highest 33rd degree. I think that's conferred. 33 you earn, 32 you earn, 33 is given. But at any rate, he was like the life of the party, and I don't know, he drank a lot, but his drinking didn't dull his memory. And he was a very, very lively, witty person. I don't mean to make light of it by remembering just that, but it impressed me when I was a little girl. And one thing I did want to say that does speak to the brotherhood of the Masons. There was a man who lived in our neighborhood. Well, we lived in the ghetto. Everybody was a neighbor. If you weren't on this side of the town, then where the colleges moved to, that became the real modern part of Atlanta, and that's where the more beautiful homes took place and so forth. But in our part of town, there was a couple, middle-aged couple, who had no children, and they were Mrs. Lizzie McDuffie and Mr. Irvin McDuffie. And they worked for the Roosevelts when he was governor of New York. And they had been in their household as their personal servants, and then they went on to the White House. He was the last person to put the president to bed every night. Not in the bed with him, but he put him to bed. Sometimes when Eleanor wasn't there. So all this to say that, very seriously, my daddy was being endangered that he wouldn't get his pension. He was going to work for the Masons full time. He had earned 30 years working on the railroad as a postal clerk. All the mail was delivered on the trains back in those days, no airplanes, not in real service. So Daddy was clerk in charge, which was a high clerical job, but it meant carrying a gun. That was the power that was intimidating. And he had to have the gun on his personhood at all times. He slept with it under his pillow. My mother was afraid of that gun. But I never touched it, but I would watch when she was changing the linen, that kind of thing. We'd see the gun, otherwise he'd take it with us. When I was 4, he retired from the railway postal clerk job. And he was being threatened that he wouldn't get his pension because people knew that he wanted to work with the Masons and his political aspirations, and they feared that kind of black strength. So Mr. McDuffie told him, he said, Dobbs, I can get you an audience with the president for 5 minutes. But now listen, that's a long, I know for you that's not even getting started. But 5 minutes with the president of the United States, that's a long time. Watch the time, don't run over, and say what you have to say, and I can get you in to speak with him. So my father was so excited, because I was told this, I was 4. And so President Roosevelt hit it off. And they got to telling jokes, and they swapped stories, 20 minutes, stayed all together 30 minutes. And he told Mr. McDuffie, I want to take this time to get to know this man. And so after that interview, he sent a telegram to the postmaster, who was at that point Jim Farley, 4 words, retire Dobbs, full pension. So he got his pension. But they used to say things like they were going to throw him off the train because he had to go to sleep at some point between Atlanta and Nashville. And I just heard about this. I mean, I didn't really know what it meant. All I knew was that when he did become head of the Masons, it seemed like a separate universe, because they had their orphan home down in Americus, Georgia, and the children of the Masons could go there. If your mother was still living, it didn't matter. If your father was dead, he'd been a Mason, you could live at the orphan home. They had a big farm, and the kids who showed academic progress, they did send them on to college. But they found that the mood of the country had changed over time, and people felt ashamed of growing up in an orphan home. It made them feel less than. So even though they had some smart children and whole families and all, they weren't bereft of each other's company, but they didn't like living in an orphan home. So what they did after a certain point, I might have been like finishing college by now, they would give them scholarships and help them go on to college rather than to live at the orphan home, and they sold that. But in Americus, which is right next to Plains, Georgia, very often the whites would set fire to the grounds, burn up the crops or something like that. There was no fire department. You know, people did the best they could to put out the fire. But this Masonic orphan home had three big buildings, like 3 stories each, and then the little houses where the faculty lived. I don't know how much acreage they had, but we'd go down there every summer. And so when my dad was running to be the Grand Master, my mother told us to get down on our knees and pray to God that he'd get elected Grand Master. And then after we went to bed that night, my sister next to me said, we got another little prayer. We have to whisper to God, don't let him die, because if he dies, we'll have to come here to live. And And both prayers were answered, yes.
You know, I didn't know we were gonna get on your dad. I remember one time when you and I had a meal together.
Stand up.
You were talking about, I remember one time you and I had a meal together, you were talking about your dad being the instrumental in some uprising near Agnes Scott or something near this area. Remember we were talking?
I don't remember. Did I live here?
Yeah, you did.
I don't remember it. If you can help me, if you can remember the thing at Agnes Scott, what would we be doing at Agnes Scott? They never cooperated with
There was
anything.
some uprising there that your father was real instrumental in terms of that area of town, Decatur, where we are right now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really?
But Dr. Butts, before you even, if you can go back and just tell us about how instrumental your father was in getting something passed that affects the whole country.
Yes, for Thurgood Marshall, you're right. I slip off that point. He got the other Masonic orders because it was all segregated. It still is segregated. You know, it's a fraternal organization, but they are segregated because they say, well, you know, you can't make everybody go together for goodwill. If people want to have a redhead club, you can have that. You know, there's nothing illegal about that. But the thing is, if you take state money for redheads and you don't let other people in, then you're doing something that infringes on the rights of others. So what he did was to get 2 or 3 other grandmasters, black grandmasters, to donate, to raise money. And every fall, they would convene in New York City and give their donation to the NAACP. And that was the money that Thurgood Marshall used to go to the Supreme Court to fight his way through with all of those Brown versus
the
Board of Education in 52. Right.
Okay. And I think Georgia gave the most money. I think this state gave the most money in order to have that law that passed so that...
It might have been.
Yes.
And all I can say is there's a lot of nickels and dimes.
Yes, indeed.
A lot of nickels and dimes because they weren't rich.
That was very instrumental.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Butts, I really enjoyed your remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Maynard was very instrumental in the growth of my life. He was bigger than life, size-wise,
Right.
ideas-wise.
12 pounds at birth. He came here big.
We served together as envoys for the Olympics when it came, and he subsequently invited me to join his board for the Youth Foundation. But this is a rare opportunity to be able to ask his aunt a little bit about Little Maynard. He was never little, but you know, some of what he was like coming along, because he was a man of big ideas and energy. Please share.
Share about his watch. His watch.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was
Okay, let me piggyback on that in a minute, but yes, Otha.
Also, if
One
you
stand
will,
up.
if
It'll
you
help your
will
voice.
share the story that you told me about Maynard, and I think he was making cinnamon buns or something,
Yes.
and he was a little guy.
Toll House
I thought,
cookies.
yes, the cookies.
Yeah, Maynard's family, you know, he had 2 marriages, and those 2 wives are cooperating on this venture. They haven't cooperated in all these years, but they're working together now to do a movie of Maynard, or a documentary or something like that. So I submitted a little story that my dear friend Otha just reminded me of, which I think is very illuminating. It tells you about my sister as well as his, you know, Maynard, but I'll just tell the story. I was 14, Maynard was 4, and so Mattie Wilder and I, she was 17, we went out during the war by train to visit our 2 oldest sisters, one in Mississippi, one in Texas. And so when we got to Texas, Maynard and his brother, Maynard Sr. and his brother, Alex, had a beautiful, huge home on 2 different streets. So like it went, I forgot, like if this was the street number of their house, the property went that way too. 40 trees on the acreage. A big veranda that swung around through all of that with, I didn't count the columns, but beautiful white columns, up 4 stories. So Mattie Wilder and I were in a little sun parlor on the 4th floor. I woke up one morning to this smell coming up. I couldn't identify it, but it woke me up. It was gorgeous. I knew it wasn't waffles, but I didn't know what it was. So I ran down the steps to the kitchen. There's little Maynard, 4 years old, taking his second batch of cookies out of the oven. He had eaten the first batch. So I said, Maynard, what are you doing? He said, I'm making Toll House cookies. He said, do you know how to make coffee? I said, I'll be right back. So I ran back up to the 3rd floor and knocked on Rena's door, my sister, and I said, Maynard's down in the kitchen, he's got the oven on, he's making Toll House cookies. Silence. And I thought she was going to come out and get after him and all. She never came out. But finally I heard her voice snickering. She said, isn't that amazing? And he can't even read. So I went back downstairs and made some coffee.
Tell the one that you told me about the watch.
The watch.
When
Oh,
Anna
yes,
was
yes.
born,
And these are two
and
things
your
I
dad got the
submitted
watch.
to I was saying, the wives, don't forget it now, Roberta. I'll just finish this because I'll forget.
This will go more with the Toll House.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So my husband and I were at a yogurt shop, and we ran into Mayor Jackson, and we said, oh, it's so good to see you. And he looked at us and he goes, do not tell anybody that I was here. Because he wasn't supposed to be eating yogurt. So I told everybody.
I also think there was at least one point where he wasn't big, because at one point we went to a tailor, and I think he's still there on Piedmont, Mario Bosco, and there were pictures of Maynard Jackson, Maynard Jackson when he was a few years younger. This was the most gorgeous man you've ever seen, and he was just slim at the time, and his face was beautiful, and I thought, this is why this man became mayor.
Yeah. Well, when he got under a doctor's care and got his firm resolve, he lost 122 pounds. That's a person. Yeah, that's a person, 122 pounds. He lost that weight. I didn't live here in Atlanta then, but the thing I loved about Maynard was that he was so honest, and I'm glad that they have never discovered any dirt under his fingernails, even in death, because they would have found it. They would have put it in the Constitution right away. But he was a very honest, and when he was about 14, he started using these big words, 5-syllable words, and so his sisters would laugh at him. And he said, I think he said mother at that time. Mother, tell them not to make fun of me. I'm just trying to improve my speech. They laughed anyway. Yes, please.
You've been emphasizing throughout, in small ways, the joining or the full expression of spirituality and sexuality.
Yes.
And I was involved.
Thank you, Miss, because so many people don't see it.
Yeah.
And I want to underscore your seeing it because it's everywhere.
Right.
It's not just in bed. It's not just with your hands on your genitals. It's the way it's Maya Angelou's poem, Phenomenal Woman.
So for many years, I co-facilitated a group for gay men. And initially it was a therapy support group. And then realizing through some trainings that I was also involved with that so many were disconnected from their spirituality because of all the condemnation and oppression by religion.
Yes.
And so then we started changing the name of the group to Sexuality and HIV and Spirituality Group. And one of the things that people would call up and they say, well, what do you mean by spirituality?
Yes, I'm sure.
And what I would say, and still say in my work, is that there's an ancient quote that says, the glory of God is a human being fully alive. And
say that again.
The glory of God is a human being fully alive. And
that's deep.
Yeah, and so I just want to honor you as a glorious woman.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so meaningful. But when babies smile, babies touch themselves so freely. Little boys stumble across the penis a little earlier, a couple of months earlier than little girls, but little girls get there until somebody stops them. And I've never seen something like my mother. She would drop a napkin over the baby when she was being changed, but always over the little boy. She didn't want us to see the little boy, And that kind of, I don't know how to put it. It's like the innocence of the child. The child is not masturbating, but the child delights in touching his toes or sucking the toes, if you can get to them, you know. The whole body is acceptable. And we forget that by the time you're 3 years old or 4 years old, or someone fusses at you. Yes.
John Bradshaw used to tell this story, I'm sure we've all probably heard it, where the family was having a gathering and this little boy came out with his penis in his hand and his parents said, "Put that away, don't ever touch it again."
That's so, I mean, it's a joke, but I hope it's just a joke. But it is so vindictive of the way people feel that they must stop the baby from exploring herself or himself.
June.
Yes, please.
That was-
Oh, I'm sorry. This lady I did see first, and then don't forget what you're going to say.
Yeah, Dr. Butts, I understand that your husband was a psychoanalyst in New York.
Could you speak a little louder?
I understand that your husband was a psychoanalyst in New York. And I don't, at that time, the New York Psychoanalytic Society at large was very white and even very European. Did you feel you were accepted? Did you feel there was discrimination?
I'm not an MD, and I was not a part of that. The guy I married became a training analyst for Columbia. He was the first black training analyst. As he used to tell my son, you know, Eric, in the world.
Because when I started my training at NYU postdoc, which was in the 80s, there were about 600 faculty and graduates, and there were only 2 African American members. And nobody ever talked about race or about diversity. So it's only now becoming a topic that people become very aware.
Yes.
But I wondered how that actually affected you in your personal life. You dealt with sexuality.
Oh, I remember, have you heard of the group called NMA, National Medical Association? Well, when blacks were not allowed to go into the AMA in the South, they could join in the North, but in the South they could not join the AMA for many years. I don't know whether it's changed or not. But there was a black organization. Well, it's true, it's not a joke. The National Medical Association was started, we used to think it meant Negro Medical Association, but National Medical Association, because whites were members also. They invited everybody, Asian and so forth. And their big contention, I remember when they were, I don't know which revision of the DSM, like 3 or something, way back, but they were talking about what constituted a certain kind of paranoia, and they were saying a typical person in this category might have been a Jewish person living in Germany who was not religiously associated with the Jewish religion, but whose ancestry was Jewish, who never went to a synagogue, and now was being persecuted by Hitler for being Jewish, which they didn't practice, you know. And so that was an example that was taken in as a case of a person qualifying for that. However, blacks who brought up some kind of a parallel between the racist opprobrium in this country were not admitted. They didn't think that was a bona fide. I remember this was like striking a match to a whole arsenal, because the NMA, National Medical Association, got very disturbed about that, and they were petitioning to broaden the categories, and I don't know whatever happened. I know there were many revisions of the DSM, which is important for insurance purposes. This may not be meaningful to everybody. I do want to welcome everybody here, and those who had a special hard time getting out but made it. It is from some of the young people in the back. Any questions, comments? Yes.
You're never going to talk about that watch.
The watch.
You're going to talk about that watch with Maynard.
The watch, yes, thank you, okay. When Maynard was born, I must say that there were 3 grandchildren. See, you don't ever just get right, you have to. I had 5 older sisters. Sisters number 1 and 2 started having children. And there were 3 little granddaughters. And my dad would come in the room, he'd say, oh, what a pretty baby. She's sweet and go right out, you know. No big deal. But when Maynard was born, he had a fit. He said, oh, we have a little man-child. We have a little man-child. We must all go and he didn't say worship him, but that's what he meant. Go to see the baby. And so we had 3 cars left Atlanta driving out to Dallas, Texas to see this baby. I was 10 years old, so I remember it well. And my dad's gift to the baby was his pocket watch, 21 Jewel Hamilton watch, that infuriated me. And I said, Daddy, why are you giving a baby a watch? She's in diapers. He said, because time is important, you must know that. And all I could think of was, I got a Mickey Mouse watch. Nobody ever told me time was important. And so I used to tell Maynard that, and he never saw the watch. His parents must have done something, sold it or something like that. He never saw it. So it's bittersweet. But my dad honored him all he could. That pocket watch, he used to love to take it out of his pocket, see what time it was, close it, put it back, you know. And what a baby was going to do with it, I don't know. Yes, please.
Could you talk a little bit more about your time working with Masters and Johnson?
Yes, thank you. I met them in a professional organization called SIECUS, S-I-E-C-U-S, which stood for Sex Information Education Council of the United States. It was started by a woman, MD, named Mary Calderon. Anybody ever heard of Mary Calderon? Her uncle was the poet who wrote something about the fog comes in on little cat feet.
Oh, Frost? Frost?
Oh, not Frost, no. From Chicago, Sandberg.
Sandberg.
Called Sandberg, yeah. That was her uncle, and her father was Steichen, the photographer. Mary Calderon was to the manor born for aristocratic relatives, yeah. She was an MD who married a very prominent, politically active MD, and she felt like, just like everybody knows good friends who's a lawyer, somebody else is an economist, somebody else is, you know, whatever. If you could get the message out, sex is good, sex is wholesome, let's work through your organization to try to get more liberal attitudes in this country about sex. So she called her organization SIECUS, Sex Information Education Council of the United States. It was composed of nurses and doctors and lawyers and people who never came into contact with each other. But what she kept saying was sex goes through everything in the city, through crime, through religion. Think about it. You know, for different church denominations, the attitudes about what's a good marriage or what's a good home, that kind of thing, they're very strict edicts, and they're not shy about saying them and announcing them. But when we try to work together, like say to get abortion legal, we have a hard time. This is before Roe versus Wade. So, and they had been working on that for a very long time. Mary Calderon did a lot of good. I'm almost losing my point. I don't know.
Masters and Johnson.
Thank you. So on her board, she had a lot of diverse, different people. And Bill Masters was on the board. I met him, but I never got to talk with him. Furthermore, he had, I've forgotten the medical name, where one eye goes this way and one eye goes that way. You know what I'm saying? The wall eye. You call it a wall, W-A-L-L. Anyway, I never knew when he was looking at me or not looking at me, so I didn't get to know him. But then after he and Jenny did their work and started publishing it, they waited 11 years to publish it. But when they did publish, they both became very, very famous. As they said, the most frequently bought but never read books. People just want to say, I bought their recent book, you know. But at any rate, they were on the board at SIECUS, and I met her, and we would gossip and pass little notes to each other with drawings. They were the best. And so we became fast friends. And so she asked me if I would be interested. I was going through a divorce, and she asked me if I would be interested in relocating into St. Louis. And I said, I don't think so, really. But I didn't want to leave New York, you know, that's where my children were born and so forth. But she said, well, we'll hold the job open for you if you change your mind in the next year or so, 2 years even. So they did, they held it for 2 years, and I went out there. But then, as I said, after I got there, we were friends. But once you go to work for the boss is not your friend anymore, he's the boss. You know? So Jenny didn't even come down to the clinic. The clinic was in St. Louis. Their home was in another little town. And that's where they had famous people to come to their home to be treated for their famous 2-week period. And I could see why she didn't want them exposed to the same people who walked into the clinic, because people would gossip. There's no way you could keep that kind of thing quiet. So they had them out at their home. But I couldn't even get her on the phone anymore. And I couldn't stand working every day. When I worked Easter, that's when I said, this is it, I gotta go. Worked Mother's Day, worked the bicentennial. I'd already resigned by then. But she said, don't leave after a year because it looks very bad on your record. Stay 2 years. Well, I couldn't. I stayed 1.5 years. And we left good friends. But I just, see, my paradigm is that here I was, a divorced woman bringing up a boy and 2 girls. I thought I could be a good mother. I might not have the best home in the world, but it was a good home. And it was my home. And that's all I could offer. So I didn't want anybody to say it wasn't a good home, you know. But I'm sure there are other homes where you have a different type of marriage or non-marriage. I don't even know. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it depends. What makes it a good home is other criteria, not whether you have matching sheets and pillowcases. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I'm off my point. I don't know where. Jackson, I'm very glad to see you. But this business of not wanting to be around others when they're talking about sex, it really shouldn't be embarrassing. Goodness knows we all are the products of sex. You just hope they liked each other. Some didn't. And that's sad. I think there's nothing worse than children growing up every day, you know, wondering why did they ever get together, you know. But you're here, and that's a miracle, and your body's a miracle, and so finding a way to rejoice in that is your task for the rest of your life. Yes, please.
To what do you attribute your transition to such a healthy attitude and joy around sex when you had a childhood of sexual trauma?
That is a deep question. I think it's irresistible if you just feel the natural juices in your body. We dream. A lot of our time is taken up in sleep. We don't remember, but the people, especially analysts, think that we're trying to work it all out in our sleep. You know, not that dreams are prophetic, but that we're trying to chew over it and work it out. And then there's some who say, no, the old ancestors had it more near the truth. They are prophetic, you know. Somehow coming in here today, here's what I want to say. Our children, our friends, our family change. Oh, it's not just the genetic thing you grew up in that's your family. You make family. Just like, I don't know what makes you fall in love. I don't know what makes you attracted to some people's voices, some people's smells. I think it would be a frightening thing if someone says, oh, I remember you, I remember the way you smell. No, I don't want to be remembered for my smell. But Franklin gave a very great compliment because I have a sister who was a good singer. And he said my voice sounded nice reciting his poems. I was so flattered. Because I love music. I love to sing. And I'm always singing. I used to have dreams with music, you know. And most people can sing. You can sing as children. If you didn't grow up in a family where there was singing, your chances may not be as good for you to become a musician later in life. But if you grew up in a family where there was singing, you probably have a good ear, you know. And instrumentalists, people who play the violin or the trumpet or whatever, they have good ears. They go by their ear in playing. Singers often can't hear themselves singing, and they may get off pitch. We had a brother-in-law who used to say, Ave Maria. And his voice, the tone was gorgeous, but he would be sliding all, and we used to just stand near the shower where we could hear him singing in the shower and laugh. Because it seemed so funny to hear him trying to sing. But if you've sung in groups, and especially as children, you have a good ear. It's in there, you know. I don't know, what has that got to do with sexuality? Well, we only have so many senses. I had a long piece in here that I took out because I think it sounded preachy, where I was talking about the formal name for the senses: smelling, hearing, seeing, tasting, touching. And then there's the sense of balance, which is extremely acute. And you're in trouble if that gets trouble in your inner ear. But our sense of who we are who our grandmothers and our grandparents told us we were. If someone said, you're the cutest little girl, or you're the cutest little boy, or this is our little man child, I never heard anybody say woman child. It just isn't said. Woman child? Contradictory. I don't know what I'm saying. I've talked too long. Thank you.